Hey everyone, and welcome to the Monetize Your Expertise podcast. I'm your host, Grant Weherley, the online course guy helping you every week to monetize your expertise. Just go to myepodcast.com for tools and links and more for all episodes. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Monetize Your Expertise podcast. Today I'm here with Abe Crystal, co-founder of Ruzuku, a platform which helps online course creators, personal brands, and experts easily create coaching programs and online courses. Thank you for joining me today, Abe.
Yeah, really excited to be here and very excited to be able to dive in deep with you on this topic that we're both so passionate about.
Yeah, well, let's jump right in then. So how did you end up working on this type of platform? What inspired you to do that?
So I think there's kind of two parts to that story. I mean, one is I have just a lifelong interest in education. It's something I've always cared so much about, and I've tried working in different aspects of education throughout my career. But Ruzuku itself as a product didn't start in like a simple linear way. And I think a lot of startups, whether it's an education startup or a product startup, it's not straightforward, right? It's kind of a winding path. And we actually started in a totally different place, which was my co-founder, Rick Cecil, and I. We were interested in ideas around personal goal setting and how do you set goals or identify areas in which you want to improve and then get support from other people, like a community or experts like coaches or teachers or consultants who could support you. That was our idea that got us started, nothing around courses specifically. And so we got very gung-ho about that and started, prototyping ideas and designing all the cool screens we would have to make those things happen. And then eventually we said, okay, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's actually step back and start testing some of these ideas with people. So we took sketches and prototypes of these ideas out to real people, interviewed them, talked to them about how they would use these concepts that we had, and it wasn't working. People didn't want this idea that we had. But the people who were interested in it were actually experts, coaches, bloggers, consultants, other people who had expertise. And some of the things we were talking about were really exciting to them. And so that led us to say, okay, how about if we spend our time talking to experts instead of just to individuals who might have some self-improvement goal? And gradually through a process of speaking with coaches, speaking with bloggers, speaking with authors, speaking with consultants, we began to realize that they wanted to deliver their expertise online, but they found it really technically intimidating to do so. So our objective became to make it much simpler, much more frictionless to share your ideas and to engage with people through online programs. So that's what we've been working on since then.
And so how did that original idea of the way you originally pictured it, how did that evolve into what it currently is? Like, what are the major differences in what you thought about and what you ended up with?
Well, the ideas that continued forward were the ideas around being able to get access to a structured sequence or series or path of content and learning activities that can help guide you through a learning or improvement experience. So the problem for a lot of people who are trying to learn, so people on the individual side, not the expert side, is they feel overwhelmed by information, right? You can pick any topic that you're interested in, and there's just a fire hose of information online in the form of disconnected blog posts and YouTube videos and bits and pieces of different email newsletters. And there's this infinity of information, but it's not structured for you in a way that you can really go through it and absorb it and begin to apply it more deeply.
That makes me think of the fitness and nutrition industries and how you can Google things all day long about fitness and nutrition, and you can find all day long completely contradictory information. You can find somebody being like, oh, you should eat a high-carb diet. You should eat another person saying you should eat a high-fat diet, and another person saying you should eat a high-protein diet. And you're just like, well, I'm reading all these articles, and they all contradict each other. I'm going to give up and I don't even care anymore. It's too difficult. So I definitely see the value in that. I think that's probably one of the core jobs of any kind of online instructor is to sort of screen that information and organize it into some kind of logical, coherent path that's easy to follow. And it's not just like the number of things that you can tell somebody, but it's just like how well you can lead people along that path.
Right, exactly. And then the second piece that we focus on a lot, and we have a little bit of a different point of view on this than others in who have a different perspective on online education, is really focusing on a social learning and a community aspect, helping people create programs where it feels like you're going through it with a group of other like-minded people who have similar challenges, similar goals, almost as if you were attending a workshop or a conference with people in person, and you have that sense of shared energy that you're going through this experience together, and you're not alone. Like, you're going to have challenges as you learn, but other people are too. And you're sharing that as you're going through it together. You're asking each other questions. So you're learning from each other, not just from the instructor. So that was something that came out of our kind of original ideas as well.
Nice. That's actually a good segue into another thing that I wanted to ask you about. So I've been working on this for, about 5 years? Is that right?
Yeah.
And so I know the online learning environment has changed really dramatically in 5 years. And, even from year to year, it evolves quite a bit. So I imagine there weren't really that many, you're probably one of the first for this type of use. Were there any other platforms out there at the time, or was this something that was you're hit the ground for? You're one of the first guys to put something like this together.
We weren't aware of that many. I think there probably were other products in the space, and we just didn't know about them because we didn't understand the space that well when we started. We were just kind of jumping in. I think probably Kajabi, which was more marketing focused, but could also be used to deliver content, was getting started around the same time. I mean, I remember seeing some of their early information. Other than that, I don't remember too much. I mean, probably what we saw when we were doing research and interviewing bloggers and other people was a lot of like DIY, do-it-yourself type setups. And this was actually one of the pain points. What people were frustrated by was, to deliver my course, I have to set up this plugin to sort of create password protected content on my website, and then I got to figure out how I'm going to host my videos and somewhere else, but make the videos viewable on my website. And then I'm going to need some kind of forum where people could discuss or ask questions. I'll need an email list specifically for this course so I can communicate with people or send announcements. There were just all these different pieces that you had to kind of stitch together out of different tools. So that was essentially the solution, was not a single product, but this kind of putting it together with duct tape. And that was really frustrating for people. Absolutely. I mean, I remember trying to build my first course when, I guess, you had already had this tool and there were other platforms like this, but they weren't really out there. It's kind of hard to find the different tools. And they weren't very well known. Nowadays, platforms like yours and the long list of online course providers, it's quite long, and the tools are actually really good nowadays. So it's really, really nice. And I imagine the course service that your platform provides has probably changed a bit over time in the past 5 years, for example. So getting started 5 years ago when there was nothing really good like that. I remember trying to use Kajabi. It was terrible a couple of years ago, and it might be better now. But all of the options were really, really bad. So an easy way to create courses was insanely valuable. But how is that offering, in terms of what's most valuable that you offer people, how has that evolved over time as it has become easier to create courses? So now maybe is it some of the core value beyond just that is the social element? Because that's actually pretty unique, is
the community element. There's not a lot of platforms that I know of that really incorporate that. So what are some things that you really focus on continuing to deliver value above just creating online courses easily?
Yeah, I think that's a really nicely focused way to address the question, at least for people who are more experienced in this area. Because yeah, I think people who follow this area and understand it quite well know that just delivering content is increasingly straightforward, has become increasingly almost commoditized in a sense, and that's because the underlying technology for creating content management type tools has gotten better and better. So even quite small teams can build those type of tools, and so now there are many tools that do that. Now that being said, I think what's tricky is it's easy to say that you let people create a course and post content for the course, but it's the details that really matter, right? And if you start looking into the details, there can be quite significant differences. Something that was surprising to me when I started researching this is that I personally would consider video one of the core media that people would use to deliver information online. Now, I certainly don't think that all courses have to have video. I've seen some really great courses that are primarily text. I've seen some really great courses that are primarily audio, or others that are a mix of different formats. But many people like to use video and can use video really effectively. But there are lots of tools that provide a sort of a structure or a template for creating a course, but don't actually host video for you. So that's an example of the type of detail that becomes really important when you look at what's the experience like of actually creating a course, and how easy is it to actually have everything in one place and manage everything in one place.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I mean, I should actually explain sort of the motivation behind that question, because I realized that, I guess I have in my own head my own set of experiences and knowledge and familiarity with this industry. And I realized, as you were saying that, actually kind of pointing that out, is that that's not true of everybody. So I should explain, I guess, where that comes from in my own observation. So, I mean, what I've seen is kind of what you were describing, that technology has evolved and there's more and more platforms and tools and WordPress plugins and all kinds of stuff cropping up, to even actually WordPress themes with it built in, the ability to provide online courses, because it's a trending, growing thing. And so what I've seen is that it's really interesting to watch the different directions that the tools go, because they each tend to have their own, I mean, they're at the end of the day, they're like, okay, this tool helps you build online courses, but there's always some unique angle that they end up going with, whether it's something, for example, as you were saying, it's built around being all inclusive, or another one that's built about being a cheap one-off payment, or a marketplace, or there's some beyond just the ability to build courses. There's some focus that they have that's on top of that. And it's interesting to see how these different tools are branching off into, one's gamifying content and turning a course into a game. The other one's helping tens of thousands of people organically see your course, or there's just all these different value propositions. And it's really interesting to see how that evolves over time. So that was kind of the motivation behind asking you that question.
So I think, one area that we focus on specifically that you mentioned is the social and community aspect of learning, which I think is really important, because one of the big challenges with online courses in every area, from universities to the entrepreneurial world, is actual engagement and participation in the courses, right? A lot of people look at their courses and they look at, are people actually doing things in my course? Are they actually taking action and progressing through the program as I've laid it out? And sadly, that the answer is often no, not really. I mean, a small core of people are, but a lot of them drop off very quickly. So one of the big challenges, I think, for the whole field is, how do you actually help people become engaged, to make progress, and to ultimately to get results from courses? So there may be different, approaches to that, but one certainly is the community aspect. And if you can feel like, again, you're not in this alone, that you're able to share your progress, get encouragement from other people, and you're able to ask questions and really get help when you need it, that can really transform your learning experience. So that's something we think about a lot as well.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with that. And actually, I have two conversations from just last week that totally reinforce this point. One of them was with a guy who has it's a course, but it's also a community. It's a monthly recurring billing type model with an online course built in and also a community. And it's really interesting. He's telling me about how it works and how he grew it and, why people join, but why do they stay? And basically it's awesome to have the course, but once people get in there, they go through all the content, they learn what they're going to learn, and they start building relationships and getting accountability through the community. He said that they might come for the course, but they always stay for the accountability in the community, and they get ongoing value from that. And also in terms of the engagement, I listened to a keynote at the conference I was at last week. It was by Laura Roeder, who was a co-founder or co-creator of B School for with Marie Forleo, and she made a really funny comment, which I thought was interesting, which is she said she got really tired of building several $1,000 courses and selling them to people, and then even if you can get people to buy it, people would pay that much money, several thousands of dollars, and then they would actually never go through the course. They'd never even watch a single video. And that started to really frustrate her. And I think that's a common frustration of a lot of content creators and online course instructors.
Yeah, very much so. It can be very disheartening when you pour your heart and soul into a course and then look and see that people aren't logging in, they're not posting, they're not asking you questions, they're not doing anything. It can really take your energy away. So again, even if you're getting signups and revenue from it. So yeah, I think it's really important for every course creator to think about that strategically. Like, how am I going to actually help people make progress? What different tactics am I going to use to engage them, throughout the course?
Absolutely. And I think it also kind of creates this moral conundrum almost. If you have somebody, maybe 50% of the people who take your course don't really go through it. And so you're trying to do your best to provide value to people. And for example, to Laura's example of a $2,000 or whatever course it's high end, it's like really well done, provides a ton of value. And then somebody buys that, or a lot of people buy it, and they don't really get the value from it. It almost, like, to me, things like that actually feels really bad, because it's like, you kind of get into this because you want to help people accomplish a certain outcome. You like, it's not like, it's like they can't even let you do that, and it can be quite frustrating. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about specific tactics to encourage engagement and actually consuming of a course when people buy it.
Yeah, well, you bring up a really interesting issue. So let me address that a little bit first, and then we can talk about engagement tactics. There seems to be a broader problem in our whole world of online courses, that it's almost too easy to be a passive consumer, right? As course marketing and the sign-up process has gotten better, it's very easy to find and buy courses. And I sometimes see this in our community of experts at Ruzuku, and it concerns me a little bit that I see people signing up for course after course, training after training. And it gets back to this sort of moral quandary you identify. It's like, at what point do we need to be kind of advising people against this like cycle of overlearning? Like, there's only so much you can learn and apply in a given period of time. You can't take 10 different intensive business courses in a year and really go deep into them and get insights from them and apply them to your business. There isn't time to do that if you're actually doing some actual work at the same time. But it's easy, I think, for people to get fixated on the results that a course can promise without fully taking into account those results are only possible with a significant investment of time and energy on your part. So I don't have an answer to that, but it's a problem that has really come to interest me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And honestly, I still make that same mistake sometimes. I'm like, oh, I want to take this course this week and read this book next week. And, you like book yourself out with like learning new things. But then it's really easy to forget that for every book that you read, for every course that you take, for every little nugget of information that you acquire, it's not just knowing that one little thing now. It's the act of implementation. It's the act of practicing that new perspective, or practicing getting better at email marketing or whatever. If you're learning a new email marketing trick, right? It takes the investment of time well beyond just the time it takes to consume a product, which is actually a lot anyways. If you're buying dozens of courses and they're all 10 hours of content each, most people don't even go through the content, let alone take the time to practice and implement, which is actually at the end of the day more key than just learning the concepts themselves. The actual implementation, that's how you get the results. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. You run into this danger of almost taking courses for like entertainment value or as a distraction, right?
Well, you know what it makes me think of? There's a really good TED Talk. I believe it's Derek Sivers. It's really short. It's basically saying that there's a lot of studies that show that if you go around telling people your goals, you get a certain kind of psychological satisfaction from it that prevents you from work, or basically it makes you less likely to actually achieve those goals. Actually less likely, because you get a certain kind of satisfaction from going around being like, I'm going to be president in 10 years. And so then you're actually less inclined to work for it because you already sort of had that positive feedback and you already kind of feel like you've accomplished it. So there's no real drive behind that. And I think there's a similar kind of effect that goes on with online courses or these kinds of products where it's like, I want to learn to sew. Okay, I bought a course on it. Now I feel like I kind of already know how to sew. I'm not actually going to watch the videos, but now I feel like I know.
Yeah.
Or no, I want to learn how to salsa dance. Okay, I bought a course on that. I'll watch the first video, but that's good enough. Now I feel like I know how to salsa dance.
Right.
And you can just go around binge buying courses.
Yeah. So I think these are real issues that really need to be addressed in deeper ways. But sort of setting that aside as a separate thread, there absolutely are things that you can do as a course creator to structure your learning experience. This is something that's really missing from a lot of course creation work that is done, and there's a knowledge base to draw on. Like, information about how to do this well is out there. It's siloed. It hasn't made its way into the world of entrepreneurial courses yet. But if you look at other areas like how people create learning and development programs within corporations that have to train large numbers of people to do in specific skills that they really have to apply to their jobs and get results, or also some things that people do in in-person workshops and other learning experiences that are not delivered online. You see in those areas, when it's done well, that you can have tremendously high levels of engagement and measurable results from different learning experiences. And I think that's like the mindset that we need to bring into the development of courses online in an entrepreneurial way. Is we can use the flexibility and the scale of the internet to reach and help lots of people at an affordable cost, but it's not good enough to just deliver content. We really need to take it to the next level and create learning experiences that are actually engaging and effective. So that's kind of like the mindset or the core philosophy is, stop thinking about content and start thinking about creating a great learning experience for people. So how do you actually do that is a big question. If I can share with you some of what we've been learning talking to people who have had success creating really engaging online programs, and also some of the sort of pitfalls to avoid. Some of the very tactical ways to look at this, I think things you can really apply. The first is to start from a perspective of trying to create minimal content rather than maximal content. And what this means is I think there's a natural tendency to that I think course creators tend to believe that students, customers, perceive lots of content as being valuable. And so if you have one module or 1 hour of video is worth so much, so the way to make it more valuable is to blow it out into 10 modules and 16 hours of video. And that doesn't map to how people learn. If you follow that equation all you're doing is creating overwhelm for people. And that's why you see the $2,000 course where someone doesn't do anything. It's because they feel overwhelmed. And so the antidote to that is to start from a perspective of minimal content, which is what would be the least amount of information that I could give people that would give them scaffolding, something they can begin kind of climbing up to start getting progress, to start seeing results. And it really helps if you think about it not as we're going to get to some giant, life or business changing result in this course, but what are small steps, incremental changes that we can take along the way. So minimal information, really distilling things down, and then using that as fuel to power people towards small results, small wins that keep them moving forward.
This is really good advice. And I think you nailed it that it's really common to perceive like being able to overwhelm your students with increased value. And honestly, this is something that I personally still struggle with. I get really excited about a topic and I want to pack in as much useful information as possible. So actually, I just ran a webinar last week. And the consistent feedback was I tried to put too much in it. And it should have been too. So I think this is a really common challenge that I think is a trap that even if you know of the trap, it's one of the traps where even if you know about it, you still fall into it sometimes. Honestly, I've seen courses that are really wildly popular that aren't very long. They're very, like you said, they're a minimal viable course, if you will.
Yeah, right. I think it's very difficult. It really takes practice and thought to apply this mindset. It's counterintuitive. And the only way that I've been able to do it in the courses that we create at Ruzuku is through revision and iteration. So doing a first pass at a course, ideally, piloting it with a group of people, or at least creating and reviewing it internally, and then going back and revising it. It's like, you can think of it as like editing a book, right? Or editing a long article. You're going to tend to write a lot of stuff at first that's just getting your ideas down on paper. But to really make it a great experience for the reader, you have to go back and edit that down to remove everything that's in it not essential. And if you can take that same mindset of being a really sharp, ruthless editor to your course, you can probably take that first pass of your course outline and content and cut it in half. But it's hard to do that the first time. You have to kind of see it and then say, okay, we've got this. Now that I can kind of look at it with fresh eyes, I can see this doesn't all have to be here. It seemed nice when I first thought of it, but we can remove this, we can remove this. This could be in a follow-up course later, and just keep, ruthlessly removing everything that you can.
So what are some suggestions that you have for getting that kind of, I guess you can do it by looking at it yourself, but of course getting direct feedback from customers or potential customers is of course very helpful as well for deciding what's valuable and what's just extraneous or overwhelming. So what are some thoughts that you have about how to interact with your customers or your market to get that kind of direct feedback about what's important and what's not?
Yeah, well, you could do it in different ways depending on sort of what phase of course development you're in, right? But let's kind of start from the point that you have identified a specific area or problem that your customers want help with. And ideally, potentially, you have a model in your head of what result they want to get from your course. So maybe it would be helpful to have like a more specific example. So I'll interview you. What's a like a problem or pain point that you hear from your customers or your community that you're potentially thinking about helping them with a course in the future?
Basically, people don't know the ins and outs of how to go about from not having a course through the process of building and marketing that course. Sometimes they're stuck on the building side of things, but a lot of times they're also stuck on, okay, I know I'm going to build it and I'm okay with that, but I'm not really sure what to do with it once it's done.
Okay. So I would based on that, I would start designing a course outline that would be designed to help people get a certain result in their own course design process. And what's tricky is to get really specific about what that result or outcome might be. And there might be a couple of different ones, but I can brainstorm a couple and you can tell me what you think.
Let's do it.
So it could be something along the lines of, people who go through this, sort of course jumpstarting program. They will, by the end of the program, they will have launched a pilot version of their course to at least 8 people and have a plan for what they will do after the pilot is live. That would be one kind of like sort of action or behavior result of the course.
I like it.
So once you have some kind of concrete outcome like that defined, then you are in a position to begin doing a first pass at the course. And then as you were talking about, collecting feedback on it. And to me, the richest, the most valuable feedback is to actually run a very rough version of the course with a small group of people, small enough that you can interact with them personally, 5, 8, 10, 12 people. It's almost like you're coaching every one of the people in this small group. You want to be emailing them with all of them directly, as well as interacting with them in the course community. And ideally, you're actually setting up one-on-one calls or Skypes with them to talk with them one-on-one and really get deep into their questions, what their experience of the material is, and how it can be improved for them. And you can get incredible insights from doing that. And again, it doesn't take a lot of people to get what you need. The other little nuance of this that I think can sometimes trip course creators up is your goal is in this type of like pilot or testing or research course. It's not to wow people. It's not to dazzle them with your amazing ideas or this great content that you've created. It's not to show them how polished your delivery can be. It's not refinement. Refinement is actually harmful because you want them to be almost co-creating the course with you. They have to be active in the sense of like pushing on things, questioning, raising concerns. And so the rougher the course feels, the more willing and able your participants will actually be to do that. The more refined it is, the more passive they will become. So this to really get feedback from people, you have to create this environment of collaboration with them. And sometimes that doesn't always come naturally, but it really helps if you approach it from this perspective of keeping things really, really rough and your interactions like really one-on-one and personal.
I'm really appreciating the in some ways contrarian views that you're bringing up, because I honestly agree with all of them. And actually, to reference, as I mentioned before, I ran a webinar last week, and one of the things that I talked about was how a lot of people that I've worked with, they get stuck. And one of the things they get stuck with is trying to make something perfect, because a lot of times the flashiest, biggest names out there that you see that have online courses, they are very, very well refined. They're like extraordinarily well filmed and well edited, and have big budgets to produce them and things like that. So of course it's there's this push to almost try and look or create something that looks like that, and I think that's can get you stuck if it's your first course or even your first several courses, because that's really hard to do. And I like how you're bringing up the point that you shouldn't even try and do that. It's actually counterproductive to do that. And I think these are important points that one should reflect on, especially for the first course, because if you try and go for perfect the first time, not only are you not going to actually finish it, but even if you do, that's still not going to help you at the end of the day, like you said.
It's very, very dangerous to try and replicate things that you see as successful out in the world, especially online, where entrepreneurs and brands are very, careful and clever about, shaping how they are perceived.
Very, very true. You could be following somebody and copying somebody, assuming they're massively successful, when in reality they're not at all. There's really no way to tell.
Yeah. And even if they are, and you can use them as a point of inspiration, you can say like, I love the impact this person in the world. I want to, help people like they are. And I want to create this powerful, impactful teaching like they are. That's great. Use them for inspiration. But and maybe they're successful from a business standpoint too. It may have taken them 10 years to get there, right? Maybe they started working on courses 5 years ago, and maybe 5 years before that they started, blogging and speaking at conferences and doing other things to start building their business. You can't compare where you are today to what someone has built over 10 years. And the things that they did to get themselves moving when they were in year one were completely different. That's what you need to be doing, is what they were doing in year one, not what they're doing now.
Absolutely. I totally agree with this. And it's funny because you can look towards people like that and think, if I do it's basically the concept of modeling, right? It's a great idea. It's a great concept. But the danger lies in when you see somebody you want to model, and then you're like, okay, if I do exactly what they're doing now, I'll be exactly like them. But then you neglect, like you said, the entire process leading up to that. And you can't always skip steps. And trying to replicate exactly what one person's doing, with a different audience and a different industry, with a different type of email list, and they were doing it 10 years before you were. If you try and do it in that exact same way, there's a lot of variables that you have no idea if they end up in the same result as what they accomplished. So an approach to avoid. But I'm curious what your thoughts are about if somebody's getting started from scratch and they're trying to build these online courses or trying to achieve the same kinds of success that people might have gotten from 5 or 10 years of doing it and perfecting it. What are some strategies that you would suggest about how to most strategically achieve that outcome?
Well, there's two pieces, right? I mean, the first thing is it helps if you have some clarity around what your outcome actually is. And I think a lot of times people don't have that, right? I think it just goes back to what you said about the dangers of modeling. Like, if you don't actually think through what kind of success looks like for you, then you can fall into, you're either literally saying that I want to be like so-and-so, or even worse, just kind of non-consciously imprinting on, okay, these are the people that I follow that seem really successful. And so that's kind of my implicit idea as to what outcomes I want. But that may not be what you really want. And so if you're working towards something that you don't really want, then all the tactics in the world aren't going to help you get there, right? You're not going to really be motivated.
Well put.
Yeah. And all these, we can talk for another hour and give people dozens of tactics they could apply, but without motivation and putting in the effort to use the tactics, they're pretty much useless. And it definitely worries me when I see people who don't really seem to have a lot of energy around their course idea and how they're working on it. And I feel like that's a symptom of the fact that they're not really clear on where they're trying to get to. They may have just picked up on these kind of themes or hype, and that's not going to work. That's not going to sustainably lead you to success. So that's my little soapbox about kind of where you need to start from. But I think what it plays into, right, is having an idea of getting to something that you really care about. So it might be, for example, that what I really care about is I want to have total control over my schedule. I don't want to have to, work standard hours. And I want to have an income of $72,000 per year because there's a lot of positive psychology research that shows if you have that income level, then the marginal gains to happiness from more money aren't that great. So I'd be totally happy with $72,000 per year and control over my schedule. If you can get that kind of clarity, then you can really start working toward okay, what do I really have to do to make that happen? So for someone like, starting from scratch, once you've got the clarity, then I think the big idea is essentially loops back to what we were just talking about with the idea of doing this rough pilot testing of your course idea. And the catchy way to put it that comes from the startup world is to do things that don't scale. And there's a great post by Paul Graham about this that I would highly recommend any entrepreneur read. It's you definitely do not have to be creating a tech or a software company to get insights from this essay. It's really valuable. But the idea is that you can't get things moving in terms of helping people and building courses and building a business by trying to create big, scalable systems. You can't build a giant mailing list, overnight, but you can reach out to personal connections. You can't do a huge course launch with all these complex, marketing channels and systems and segmentation the first time you do a course. But you can just have a course that people really want and do a good job explaining the value they'll get out of it. So it's keeping things simple and doing things that don't scale initially, which means lots of personal outreach, lots of talking to people, lots of using your personal passion for your topic to create energy around your course idea and not trying to act like a big brand or a big company. So that's kind of the mindset. Tell me if that's too high level, and we can talk about other tactics that you can apply based on that mindset.
No, this is a really interesting conversation. It is pretty high level, very conceptual, and very kind of reflective. I find myself sitting here kind of sort of daydreamy, kind of thinking about things. And I think it's actually quite challenging what you're talking about to balance between, like you're saying, the things that don't scale and also building something that's long-term. And of course, in the beginning, what you do in the beginning versus what you do when you're doing it for 5 years is quite different. But even just kind of in the day-to-day, I've thought about this a lot, which is if you're trying to build something that's a bigger, longer-term initiative, in many ways, you can't only do that because you do need things that have immediate effect. Mm-hmm. Like if you're trying to build an email list from scratch, you can't only do the long-term type strategies. You should probably mix it with some short-term strategies as well, because there's certain things that work quickly and certain things that take a long time but have a greater effect. Mm-hmm. So it's always a challenging question to think, okay, for any given initiative, whether it's building an online course, building an email list, building a brand, building whatever, partnerships, how do I balance between something that's short-term and relatively immediate but not scalable and has sort of a low ceiling? And how do I balance that with something that's very long-term, very, very scalable, very big payoff, but may not work for 3 to 5 years? I think it's quite a challenging equation, is how do you balance those two?
Yeah.
And that's something I still think about a lot. But I do like your point that, especially in the beginning with a new initiative, a new project, especially if you're first getting into business in general, it's so easy to read the blog post about how to scale a certain kind of system that you're 3 to 5 years away from having any relevance to where you are now. And it's really easy to fall into because sometimes when you read advice on how to do something or a strategy about how to do something, it's really easy to be like, oh, that's really cool, I want to do that. Not realizing that it's not really geared towards what you're doing and where you're at, because a lot of times nifty blog articles don't start out with a disclaimer saying this is only for these types of people doing it for this long in this industry, right? So it's kind of hard to know what works for who.
Exactly. So let's bring it down to really concrete. Let's give people something actionable that if you buy into this idea of, okay, I've got to start small and also do things that don't scale. Okay, how would you actually do that to get started on building a course business from scratch? Well, the way I would start if I was trying to build an expertise and a course business from scratch today is I would literally start by talking to people. And so you have to start with some kind of frame, right? So something I'm interested in personally is routines. And for example, I think if you have a good routine in the morning, that can really set you up for important health goals like exercise and things like that. So just really interested in how do I create a good morning routine for myself and maybe help other people do that too. So if I was going to try and start working on that, I wouldn't go out and start creating a course about how to design the perfect morning routine right away. I would start by reaching out. I would just brainstorm a list of friends, colleagues, connections, you know, everyone I could think of that might possibly be willing to talk to me about this topic and their personal challenges with it. And then I would just schedule calls or like, you know, coffee meetings or lunches for people who are in person, who are local, with as many people that are as willing to talk to me. But at the very least, I would shoot for like, you know, 20 to get started. And I would talk to those people about, you know, what's your morning like today? You know, what do you like about it? What frustrates you about it? You know, what would your kind of ideal, you know, morning look like that would set you up for a great day? And, you know, and a number of other kind of exploratory questions to really understand what this part of their life is like, what challenges they have, and what they would like to improve. And I would take all the insights from that and then use it to begin to develop a focus for what would be my very first, you know, kind of rough pilot course. And then I would take that course idea back to these people that I've already started building relationships with around this. And that's where I would get my first group of students. That's how I would get that pilot group of 5, 8, 10 people, is this group of people that I've already interviewed, already started building a relationship with. So that's like, those are like specific steps I would take to kind of bootstrap a course business from zero.
By the way, let me jump in here and say that what you're saying is very much best practices for online courses. This is something that literally the last course I launched, that was pretty much the exact process that I use, which is a series of steps where it's think of a problem, create a list of people to talk to them, reverse engineer the course, go back to those people and see if they're willing to be the first customers that you walk through the course with, as you mentioned earlier, in sort of a live, more one-on-one format, so that you can go back and revise it and refine it later for something more scalable. That is the exact model that I use for myself and for clients that works really, really well. So I can absolutely vouch for that. And actually, this makes me think of a coaching client I had, I think it was about 6 months ago now, and it actually kind of touches on a couple things we've talked about. She came to me and she is really inspired to start creating fitness information products for a specific niche. And she was pointing to a very specific brand that she's like, I want to do what this person's doing. Mm-hmm. And she sells a $47 ebook and it's on this website and she has an online course that does this. Like, I want to do that. How do I do that? And I was like, whoa. That's a great idea. Like, that's awesome. I hope you can work up to that. But if you just started to do that from scratch, it would take you a very long time. And it's the wrong thing to start with. So actually, one of the things we worked on doing was immediately taking what she sort of wanted to immediately make like a high-end product around, mm-hmm. and getting that in front of people and just talking to people, getting direct feedback, working one-on-one with people to really understand the problem in the market that she wanted to target. Because if you try and create something without that information, it's definitely going to miss the mark. So I absolutely think all of this is key.
Yeah, great example.
So we've talked a lot about like the future and how to work towards the future and how to work towards building something greater. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about as we get towards wrapping this up is the course industry and online learning and all this stuff has evolved so quickly over time. You know, it's hasn't even been around that long. And so I'm curious what you think about what will happen over maybe the next 5 to 10 years. For example, you mentioned how, I like the way you put it, by the way, the silo of instructional design that's very much intertwined with corporate training, but hasn't really spilled over very much into entrepreneurial training, if you will. Do you see all of that sort of merging together and that merging with like Harvard, you know, higher education type stuff, all of it coming together? Or where do you think all this is going to go?
Yeah. Let me peer into my crystal ball here.
It's a big question, I know. I'm curious your thoughts.
No, I'm curious to see how it plays out. I mean, I think on the positive side, the world of like independent online course creators, so the people who would be interested in listening to this, has just tremendous growth opportunity ahead of it. You know, we live in a world of like constant change, and the only way to deal with that is constant learning. And the traditional, you know, learning institutions, universities, associations, they're not well positioned to move at internet speed and also to provide solutions to the huge variety of learning challenges and questions that people have today, many of which are for very small groups that a traditional large institution could never serve, but these small groups can absolutely be served by, entrepreneurial experts working online. So for everyone working in this area, the best is yet to come. There's huge growth ahead. Now, the challenge, I think, is the bar is also being raised and will continuously be raised over the next 5 or 10 years as to what people expect to get out of a online course or program. As people take more courses, become more familiar with the idea, they will become savvier and more discerning, and they'll become more demanding about the results that they get from courses, and more skeptical about signing up for them. And so the onus will be on course creators to really work on these challenges of design, engagement, measuring results, interacting with participants, demonstrating the results and outcomes that people are getting from your courses in different ways.
I think that downside there is actually in some ways an upside, because one of the things that I like about where I see this going, or at least my crystal ball says it's going to go, is it basically opens up continuing education beyond traditional, just sort of elementary type stuff to competition. So now all of a sudden, there's all this pressure to make something really, really effective and really high quality. And that's going to evolve and increase over time. So maybe as a course instructor, it's kind of like, that's lots of pressure to make something great. But as society at large, from that perspective, I think that's a really, really good thing, because I'm crossing my fingers. I hope it goes away, that you can have that really god-awful professor who's smart but terrible at teaching. They won't be able to get away with that. Or the sleazy marketer who's an awesome marketer, and they can sell that $5,000 course all day long, but people who get in it are really unhappy because it's not very high quality. The person's just a good marketer, right? I think hopefully the selective pressures will push all of those things out. And so everything as a whole gets much higher quality. And I think that's very, very beneficial to society at large.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree.
Great stuff. So as we wrap this up, I'm sure a lot of people will want to check out what you do and more about you and platform. So throw out the URL for everybody to check out and learn more.
Sure. You can find us at Ruzuku, RUZUKU.com. Or you can check out our blog and podcast called The Authentic Expert. So you can just Google The Authentic Expert.
Good stuff. And actually, I'm kind of curious now. I forgot to ask you this earlier. How'd you come up with the name?
Yeah, so Ruzuku obviously is not an English word. It's actually from Swahili and means to provide structure or support. And we just found that by kind of looking at other languages for something that we thought was kind of aligned with what we're trying to do, but that would lead to like a short, name that we could also get a domain name for.
Nice.
And so, yeah.
It's catchy, actually. It sounds like a good brand name. And yeah, so that's cool. And actually, I just was speaking with Danny Iny the other day, who is in the online course space as well. And he has a marketing company that he rebranded to it's like Miracy, I think it is. And so it's interesting. I'm just really interested nowadays in brand names, because I am so bad at creating names for my personal brands. So it's really interesting. I guess I'm doing a little bit of research for down the road. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. And thank you so much for coming on. This is a really interesting conversation. I think we did get a little bit like heady and high level at times, and hopefully people find a lot of value in that. But also the specific framework that you went through for starting from scratch, I think was really valuable. So I hope people who are listening, I hope everybody follows that and really thinks through that. I hope you wrote it down and take action.
Absolutely. Let's see some great courses being created.
Yeah, so thanks again for joining me today, Abe.
Thank you.
Hey, entrepreneurs and experts, I just wanted to thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you learned at least one new big idea that helps you evolve your skills and gets you closer to monetizing your expertise and creating that successful knowledge business. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes and Stitcher, and check out myepodcast.com for all episodes as well as the tips and tricks mentioned in this episode. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.